And here we go. Week 10, day 1. And we are going to be talking about our next big topic for our next discussion. And it's a very broad category, by the way, the social impact of computer science. So specifically, we're going to be talking about algorithmic bias and related things like that today. And probably for a while, too. All right, so let's get going. The really important thing that people need to realize is that computer science is not isolated. It does not live in a mathematically pure bubble where you can just solve problems without having to worry about the real world and things like that. You know, pretty much anything you do worthwhile is going to impact the world in one way or another, right? If you work on autonomous vehicles might run people over, but also, they're going to displace truck drivers and things like that. I think I've told you about this before. Like when we studied facial recognition in grad school, there was never like a moment when it was like, hey, do you think that maybe somebody might, I don't know, abuse this? Right? Like it was always just like, let's figure out how to get the max accuracy out of our facial recognition algorithms. And there's never, a pause or discussion to think about like how this could be used or abused by different countries. And now you've got China with I think they're up to like 500 million cameras installed in different municipalities around the country that tend to have AI facial recognition systems that look at people's faces, and if you talk on your cell phone when driving, it'll send you a ticket, things like that. The UK is right now going around just randomly searching people, but not searching them because that'd be illegal, I guess. But they just take a picture of your face, and if it flags you as a criminal, then they arrest you and they haul you down to the station. The only trouble is 96% of the people that are flagged as being a criminal aren't. And so, there's a story of this black school kid who's walking home. The police they walk up to him, take his picture. He's a criminal. They arrest him in front of his friends, traumatizing the poor kid and haul him down to the station. They're like, oh, our bad, sorry, And they do this over and over again. And then there's another story of a person who's like, no, screw you. I'm not going to let you take my picture. That's Orwellian. And so they arrested him for that, because in the UK, they don't have the same, belief in natural rights that we have in America. And so if you refuse to allow the police to randomly take your picture and roll the dice and see if it misidentifies you as a criminal, then that's illegal as well, and they'll haul you in for that. So it's it's a situation where we just acted as if we're just solving problems, man, and we'll let somebody smarter than us, worry about the social consequences, and I don't think you can really do that, right? Jurassic Park, right, has the famous quote, you wanted to see if you could, so you didn't stop to see if you should. And I think that's something that all of us need to, just think about, right? Like, when I was fresh out of high school, the business that I worked for, I did virtual reality video game development, shared a building with a sister company that did medical device development. And I realized very early on that with the number of bugs that I wrote in my software, I did not want to write medical software. You know what I mean? Like, if you want me to program like one of those, devices that like, shocks people's hearts, into working again, like imagine you have a bug in it, it just doesn't work, right? You're gonna kill people, Like how much do you trust your code to work, when you write it, and work in all those different weird edge situations. It's a rainy day, it's the guy's just been running, so there's salt and water on his chest messing up the signal. Like there's so many different variables, and even if you get it to work right in the ideal circumstance, somebody who's the shaved chest, they don't have any hair, like man, like because the paddles are supposed to detect if somebody is in atrial fibrillation or whatever it's called. I don't know. I'm not a medicine person, but it's supposed to detect if the heart is like not beating correctly, and if it's not beating correctly, then and only then will it do the shock. Whereas if you put one of those things up on people who aren't having a heart attack, it's not going to shock you, or it's not supposed to. And imagine getting that wrong. You know what I mean? Teenagers are going to grab those things and try shocking each other. It's going to happen, right? So imagine you get that code wrong, and it detects somebody is having a heart attack when they're not, and you turn somebody's heart off or something. You know what I mean? No thanks. No thanks. Yeah. Nowadays, I'm better at programming, but man, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I mean, I know somebody's got to write that code, but So here's a photograph in China. This guy got a 50 RMB fine for talking on a cell phone because he was scratching his face. So China has cameras everywhere with machine learning, AI, whatever you want to call it, processing all the video, and they're like, oh, yeah, that guy's talking on a cell phone. And so he gets a letter in the mail saying, hey, you were talking on your cell phone. And he's like, man, I don't know. I don't even have a phone in my hand. Like, I'm just scratching my face, dude. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, I can see how the software could think he was on the phone. I mean, it's actually pretty good. Like, a lot of cell phones are black, so. Several people are typing. Yeah, you're writing the code for Tesla's autopilot. A Tesla on autopilot just ran into a parked state trooper's car. The other day, a couple days ago. Somebody's got to write that code. Did they have a way out of the ticket? Yeah, he had to go into the municipal office and be like, yo, there's no cell phone here, and they waived it. Yeah, and before we say it's just China, like America had a fascination with red light cameras, not because they were useful, not because they worked properly, but a lot of municipalities installed red light cameras at intersections because it was a source of money, which is one of those things that always irks me when somebody's like, oh man, corporations, they only care about money. Like, man, have you ever worked for a school district? You ever worked for a city government? Man, they care about money just as much, and they don't have the same level of accountability that a corporation has a lot of the times because they're the government. If they want to put in a red light camera, a corporation can't do that. Corporations can't just arbitrarily fine people for whatever. And so in San Diego, which is where I'm from, they put red light cameras in all over the place, and then they reduced the yellow light duration. right? To get more tickets. So a corporation can't do that. You know what I mean? Corporations don't have the power to change the duration of the yellow period on a traffic light. And so if you were driving home and there's a yellow and you're used to it being like a 3-second yellow or whatever, you're driving and now it turns red and now you're running red lights you aren't running before. That was because the city of San Diego was motivated by, let's just squeeze money out of our people. And the number of accidents in San Diego went up after they installed the red light cameras. You know, like the whole reason why they sold it to the public was, with red light cameras in place, people are not going to run the red light because they'll get a ticket. And the number of accidents went up because they also reduced the yellow time. And so it turned green sooner for the people coming this way and run into them. People would slam on their brakes a lot more. Because now that you've got like a 0.1 second yellow time, it wasn't that bad, but let's just imagine if it just goes yellow, red, then people slam on their brakes the second they see a yellow, and then people behind them run into them. And so, it was horrible. And the way the red light cameras worked, they didn't actually photograph you. They didn't actually photograph you crossing the line when it was red. They photographed you once you were in the intersection. So they weren't even taking a shot of you breaking the law. Because you can be in the intersection when it's red. You know what I mean? That's not against the law. What's against the law is crossing the line when there's a red light. And they didn't have any photographic or video evidence of that. What the red light cameras would do is use the power of algebra. They would take 2 shots when you're in the intersection, and they would interpolate backwards in time to figure out if you had crossed the line. But here's the thing, they assumed that speed is linear. The person's not changing speed. Guess what happens when people are running red lights? They tend to accelerate through it. When you're accelerating, you can't just draw a straight line because it's a curve. And so the whole thing was just rotten from start to finish. And the judges weren't interested in it. They're like, well, this is how it is. I'm sure the software is fine. No, you can't assume the software is fine, judges. You cannot assume the software is fine. Look at the math. It's wrong. It's just 100% wrong. Everything about it is wrong. And so finally, and my dad actually, he wasn't even in court for one of those things, but he was watching these tickets, and my dad's like, hey, do you want me to explain to you why the math on this is wrong? And the judge's like, no. All right, fine. But finally, there was enough outrage over all these different things. The Union Tribune, I think, ran a series of articles on it, that the judge finally was like, yeah, this thing is BS, man. You can't do it. And they shut the whole program down. At great expense to the taxpayers, of course. So... Oregon doesn't have sales tax. They hide cops on the windy roads on the coast. Judge got a ticket. Now, hold on a minute here. Yeah, that's a great way of getting things overturned, too. Especially if you're through on a yellow and then you get a ticket for running a red. There's no... Yeah. Okay. So, MIT Media Lab researcher, Joy Bolamni, discovered that the accuracy of facial recognition systems decreased on people with darker skin, and she actually had to test her project. She had to put on a white mask so that the algorithm would detect her face and track it properly, and this turns out to be a problem, because when you're doing things like in the UK, just walking around randomly searching people by taking pictures of them, or the TSA is using it to flag terrorists in airports, right? As it turns out, again, you're grabbing people in front of their families and slamming them to the ground and hauling them into a back room, only to go, oh, wait, sorry, it's not you, right? It's a problem, Because it's traumatizing to get arrested. You know, or at least for most people it is. My roommate thought it was funny to get arrested. But traumatized me, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I get a phone call. Hey, Bill, I'm in jail. I'm like, oh, man, what'd you do? It's like, you know how I went to a concert? I'm like, yeah. It's like, I got into a fight with the band. What? It turns out that he was yelling, "You suck" at the band. And so the drummer on stage leapt off the stage, charged through the crowd, and got into a fight with my roommate, who was quite drunk at the time. So the police detained him there at the concert. They didn't detain the drummer because the drummer was playing. But they detained him, and then my roommate proceeded to curse at the cops long enough. They finally just had enough of him, and they hauled him downtown and threw him in jail. And then I get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning to go get him. Not like I wasn't awake, you know, I was a computer science major, but I get down there at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they're like, sorry, you're going to have to wait for an hour because our computer systems reboot for an hour. That's what traumatized me. I'm like, why the hell does it take an hour to reboot your computer systems in a jail, and you have to do that every day? Like, what the hell? Like, that offends me as a computer science person. So it wasn't until 5 that I was able to get him out. So yeah, so there's a good movie called Coded Bias. I don't know where you can watch it right now. It was available for free. I'm not sure where it is now. I assume it'll be up on Netflix at some point. But you can see a talk with Choi Bulwamni and with the filmmaker here on these 2 links. Pretty good. It's a pretty good documentary. An hour to reboot every day. I know, right? I'm just sitting there. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, an hour. It takes an hour for you to reboot your computers. Nobody can come in or out in the meantime. Like, offended. Highly offended. My college's website went down every day at 3 o'clock in the morning. It would reboot it for an hour every day. Is this thing powered by hamsters? Are the hamsters tired? Like, is that why like, it's a web server. It's supposed to be up. The whole point of the... Okay. So, I don't know, man. Like, I get professionally offended by a lot of things. Whenever I see bad computer science. So, yeah, social impact of computer science. Okay, so AI, machine learning, whatever you want to call it. The professionally offended. That is correct. I don't get offended like these cancel culture people do. But I'm just like, man, who wrote this system, man? Like the DMV. The DMV's computer system offends me. Like, man, who wrote this stuff? Okay. So machine learning, AI, whatever you want to call it. So last year during the coronavirus, they canceled the big standardized test in the UK. And so what they did was they wrote a program that would determine, all right, based on what we know about you, we're going to give you a grade. We're just going to guess and give you a grade. We're just going to guess what grade you would have gotten. We're going to write software, and the software is going to determine if you would have gone to 1600 on the SAT or not. And as you can imagine, this did not go over well with a lot of parents. If their kids did not get into a good college, they're like, what the hell, man? How can you tell that my kid would have gotten a good grade or a bad grade on the SAT? And I hid the video for a second there because there was a big enough outrage over it that they revoked it. They decided, maybe that's a terrible idea, right? Because as it turns out, if a kid was at Seton Hall or something like that, they would tend to get into a college, and if they weren't, they wouldn't. So there's a giant controversy over that. Who writes the software controls your fate as a student, you know what I mean? Like, we're just going to use AI to determine you should get an A and you should get an F. Like, the hell, dude? Can't. Like, it's dubious. The algorithm, like, people will talk about it like in capital letters, like the algorithm with capital T and capital A for YouTube and Facebook and things like that. because that's really impactful. Like that's the algorithm. Like what it plays next. Like that's what people have been blaming a lot of our society's problems on. Whether true or false, they're at least blaming it. The problem being, for example, engagement is often driven by sensationalism, right? So something that is, well balanced and uses critical thinking and presents well-founded evidence. And when it presents evidence, says, hey, I wasn't able to tell if this reference is valid or not, that doesn't drive engagement, right? What drives engagement is somebody saying, they're taking our jobs, or, Trump's the devil, and all these, and that's why people have, been saying, I don't know if it's true or not, but it's been driving the polarization of America. The Republicans are moving more to the right, Democrats are moving more to the left. And, Facebook down here, what news, but not just news, like which of your friends Facebook shows to you. It's not going to show you all of your friends. It's going to show you the friends that you'll engage with, which are, it doesn't necessarily mean you like them. Like it could be like your friend that posts crazy things and you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's posting these crazy things. And so it creates echo chambers where all you hear are opinions of people that agree with you, and occasionally there's a couple morons from the other side, and you're like, ha 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 ha, And so, YouTube, is blamed for like driving the flat Earth conspiracy theory, which, I mean, come on, out of all the different conspiracy theories, like, if you've ever been on an airplane, you can see the curvature of the Earth. Like, it's not, like, it's like one of the dumbest, like not even like in Columbus's day did people believe the Earth was flat. You know what I mean? Like there's this urban legend that like Columbus was set out to prove the Earth was round. Now everyone knew the Earth was round. They just did the math properly. Columbus did the math wrong. He read a book that suggested the Earth was actually smaller than it was. Therefore, it was feasible to sail to the west and hit India. As it turned out, Columbus was completely wrong about it, and the people that he was disproving were right. He just got lucky and ran into another continent. Nobody thought the Earth was flat. That's just one of those myths that people believe. And now that's the conspiracy theory coming back. And so, a lot of people are blaming YouTube for that because, you watch some video and then YouTube's like, oh, it would really drive their interest. 5 facts about why the Earth is flat, and whoa, and then it'll and if somebody engages with that, then YouTube will send them down a rabbit hole of like flat Earth videos and things like that. So I mean, you can look at the moon, right? The moon's round. Right? I don't know. It seems like a very odd conspiracy theory, and I somewhat suspect that a lot of the people that say the Earth is flat are just kind of trolling, I don't know. Like the one guy who wanted to build a rocket to prove the Earth was flat. Like people are like kickstarting it just because it's kind of funny and trollish to do so. Man who looked at that and said, "Yeah, we can do that." The guy who made the software, yeah, I think he should be fine. Yeah, the faking the moon landing. It's like they put reflectors on the moon so you could, in theory, send a radio wave and bounce it off the reflector. Okay. Yeah, it's just a very odd conspiracy theory to me. I don't know. Like there's plenty of like, there's plenty of like conspiracy theories that you could engage in that at least are not, completely idiotic in my opinion. Especially if you look at like the Tuskegee experiments the government did, for years. People were like, the government was experimenting on black people. It turns out it was, like, right? Raw creation, sea foam, or all these other things. Like the government sprays biological weapons over San Francisco to see how they would spread. True story. Or the Tuskegee syphilis study, where the government was ethically unjustified ethically unjustified. That's a hell of a way of saying one of the most unethical things ever, right? So the purpose of the study was to observe the natural history of untreated syphilis. The African American men who participated in the study were being told they were being treated for syphilis, and they were not. And so, and so they were promised free medical care, but they were deceived, who never informed them of their diagnosis. They give them placebos, ineffective methods, and diagnostic treatments, so they could see what happens to the human body when you have syphilis. Which, by the way, is not like, haha, I got syphilis. Like, syphilis is nasty. It is a nasty disease. It used to actually be worse. If you look at the history of European sexually transmitted diseases, syphilis, man, used to be spread skin to skin. Like, it wasn't even an STD necessarily. You can get it just by contacting somebody's skin. It would cause their skin to rot and cause nerve damage and things like that. It was supposed to be 6 months, lasted 40 years. None of the infected men were treated with penicillin, despite the fact it was widely available. Yeah, so it's been cited as arguably the most infamous biomedical research in U.S. history. Yeah, so yeah, there's plenty of things like that if you want to dig into those things. But like flat Earth, like, and so YouTube has been blamed for that because it's trying to drive engagement, and so it pushes out stories that people go, oh, look at that, things like that. So did they isolate them? Nope, they just didn't do anything to them. They wanted to watch the ravaging of the human body by syphilis. That's what they wanted to do. People go blind. Can you imagine? Not being able to see for the rest of your life because the government wanted to see, hey, are you going to go blind? Oh, guess the answer is yes. Yeah. Probably not a coincidence that it was black people either. Yeah, it is horrible. It is horrible. They have AI systems that screen resumes, right? Because if you have a job opening, 10,000 people apply, you don't want to go through it by hand. Trust me, like grading 100 students in this class is bad enough. Imagine 10,000. Like, forget about it. So they have AI resume screeners, right? And that's why it's really important to actually spend some time working on your resume, making sure the right keywords are in there, making sure that it's clear enough that the machine learning algorithm will be able to pick up. I have 7 years of experience, doing whatever, so that you get past the AI and you can have an actual real person look at your resume, right? So whenever you guys go out into the workforce, spend some time figuring that out. Reverse engineer the AIs and craft your resumes. Don't do all this crazy formatting and things like that. You need it in so that the AI can pick up entire sentences. Like, don't split into, half your name is on one column and half the name's on, like, no, don't do anything crazy. Like, you need to make it so the AI pattern recognition will pick up the right keywords. And when there's a job opening, tweak your resume to match the job opening's requirements. If it says you can speak French, I can speak French. Like, just put it, put it in there. There's also AI for promotions. We can have a whole talk on that. Like how stack sorting and how different tech companies promote people and stuff like that. Chatbots are a thing. Like at our financial aid website for Clovis Community College, we were paying quite a lot of money for a chatbot, and let's see if it's still there. Yeah, there you go. There's a chatbot. Hi there. And at least it identifies you as a chatbot. Some of these things like, hi, my name's Martha. And you tries to pretend to be human. What would you like to know? How much does it cost to have a chatbot per year? No answer. No comment. Uh, Sometimes it is best to make the resume unique for that job. Yeah, yeah. You want to tweak it and make sure that you're hitting all the requirements. There was a famous thing where like teachers were being promoted based on machine learning, and so teachers would fight over having better students in their classrooms, because if the test results you get are how you get paid, you get scratch. Like, I don't want to teach the bad students. Give me the good students. Like, sorry, little Sally, get out of here. You're a dum. Kick you out of my classroom. And it creates downstream problems like that as well. At schools, like I've worked with schools for almost 20 years now, and man, schools get in trouble if their test results don't go up. So they will get rid of kids that are bad students, right? Like, yeah, off to the alternative school with you, because and so all of these systems aren't, the notion is like, all right, we'll hold schools accountable, right? Like, we will pull funding from a school if they don't show gains in test results. Something called Title I. Title I is billions of dollars a year for poor schools. Great program, but you have to show improvement. If you show you have to have a plan. You have to have all these things. If you have a decrease, then you can lose funding. So the solution is get rid of your bad students, right? So all of these things create downstream consequences. Deciding who sees ads for housing. Remember last time how we talked about the Fair Housing Act? Like, you cannot discriminate in the U.S. Back in the 1960s, there is a series of laws passed on these things. You cannot discriminate based on race, and one of the big ones is housing. Right? You cannot entail houses. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. Like in Arizona, they would build an all-white neighborhood that would be entailed that said you can only sell to a white person, and you have to transfer this contract to them, so they can only sell to a white person. All that was done away with in the 60s. So enter Facebook. And so Facebook has, Facebook is an advertising system. That's why Facebook exists. It's not a social network. The social network is just to get you in and to get you using the system so they can advertise to you. And every time you engage with somebody, Facebook looks at what you post and tries to infer things about you. Oh, well, that person is in the 25 to 30 age category, and they have an income of $150,000 a year, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason why Facebook is trying to know everything it can about you, and why it allows you to upload photos for free and to communicate for free, is because they sell targeted advertising. Targeted advertising is a lot more valuable than just spamming everything. If you put a flyer in my front door saying, "Hey, you want to buy a house?" I'd be like, "No, man, I'm good. I'm fine. I don't need one." But if you could tell me on Facebook, target this ad only at people that are looking for buying houses, and you can determine that. Like, if somebody posts on Facebook, "Hey, man, I want to buy a house. Anyone know any good ones?" Then Facebook will read that and be like, start serving up ads of like housing, maybe real estate agents, stuff like that. It'll start targeting it at you. Now, one of the problems was because Facebook could infer your race or ethnicity and gender and things like that, that allowed advertisers to say, advertise the fact that we've got 20 apartments available for rent right now, but only advertise them to white women or Asian women, right? And so the Trump Ben Carson, the head of the HUD for Trump's administration, sued Facebook because people were using Facebook's system to target ads at people of specific races and genders and things like that, which is illegal. And Facebook was allowing it. And so Facebook agreed, yeah, that was a bad idea, our bad. And so if you're doing any housing advertisements now, you can't select no Jews, like that, like are bad. Yeah, maybe we should have thought about that beforehand, right? And so there's a lawsuit. I don't know if it's been resolved or not. This was obviously a few years ago, but there's a lawsuit, and violations of the Fair Housing Act are actually quite substantial. So probably not to Facebook. Facebook is probably just like $10 million, whatever. Right? Heard stories of people where they have the phones with them, they're talking to their friends. Yeah. That Facebook Messenger turns you, like they turn your microphone on, right? Like the way that Messenger, I don't know if it still is the case, but the way that Messenger was able to run in the background all the time was it would leave your microphone on, and Android would not put apps that have the microphone on to sleep. And so Facebook literally was listening all the time and transcribing what you were saying. I don't think that's the case anymore. But, and Facebook says it wasn't listening to you. It would just simply leave the microphone on to keep it from sleeping. And this would be probably 4 or 5 years ago. Uninstall Messenger, right? Like, if you want to turn it off, Catherine, uninstall Messenger. It's the upshot. Use the website. I wouldn't trust Facebook to do the ethically right thing ever. And people dug into the things that was in its directory, and they found these audio recordings and things like that. But Facebook says it wasn't using them. It was just recording things to keep it from sleeping. Who knows? Like if you want to buy into that conspiracy theory, go for it. Just don't do flat Earth. Come on, Like you can take an airplane, look down, look out the window. Next time you're on an airplane, I don't know. Yeah. So, but look into whether or not they're still doing it, because I would assume they're not doing it anymore due to the outrage that came about from it. But I am not up to date on that issue. Do not think that just because it was that case 5 years ago that it still is now. Use your critical thinking powers. Dig into the issue. Try to find out if Facebook is actually listening to you, because they say they're not. But there have been a lot of cases of people talking to each other and then advertising to them. What Facebook says is happening is that they can infer, like let's say that you're talking about going to a football game with your friends, and then it starts advertising football to you. What Facebook will say is we can infer that you're a football fan from who you engage with. If your friend, like if Facebook finds out your friends are going to the Bulldogs game, then it'll advertise the same thing to you, because it knows what your friends are doing too. And if you want to know something creepy, this is actually true. Let me see if I can find it here. So Facebook is geographically tracking you. Okay, so let me see if I can. This is always dangerous, pulling up your social media on let's see, suggested friends. Let's see, people you may know. Let's see here. So wife's coworker, former TA. She died 2 years ago. That's sad. Mother of a friend of mine who died a couple of years ago. Very young too. 2 kids. Nico. Not that Nico. Let's see. So, why is this guy being suggested? We have no mutual friends. Why is this guy being suggested as a friend of mine? Why? Because he replumbed my house. He is the son of the guy who owns Central Valley Replumbing. We replumbed our house, which means rather than having pipes running beneath the foundation, which were leaking, which was destroying our carpet, they came in, put a dozen holes in the drywall, and replumbed the entire house. He was the foreman of the crew, which meant he was here at my house long enough, and Facebook knew he was here because it's watching his geographical location, and he knew I was here, and he knew he was here for 3 days. So Facebook is suggesting him as a friend because it is spying on our geographical location. Tri-Valley Replumb Specialists. Right? My gardener has been suggested as a friend for me. So, yeah, if you spend time at my house, Facebook will suggest that you be my friend. So, apparently, it could just be smart, but I don't think so. I think that it's actually just watching my location and watching his location, saying, "Oh, look, you guys are next to each other for 3 days. You should add each other as friends." Is Facebook the only app doing that? I doubt it. Do you know why Pokemon Go exists? Why does Pokemon Go exist? To make money? Yeah, it's pretty good at that. But the reason why Pokemon Go exists is because Niantic, the people who make Pokemon Go, their first game was called Ingress. And Ingress is a game where you walk around capturing points of interest in your neighborhood and coloring it your color. There's the green team and the blue team. Connect 3 points together, it makes a triangle, colors it your color. It's kind of like leaders in augmented reality. Niantic Shop, no, I don't care about that. Wands Ready, I don't care about that either. Protect the Statute of Secrecy. That's ironic. That's ironic, Niantic. This is obviously Harry Potter. Protect the Statute of Secrecy. The reason why Niantic exists, it was part of Google. And Google has great street data, right, for navigating around town, right? They can pull street data from municipal governments and things like that. Google Maps is a very accurate map of the world. The only time you'll see errors usually is when there's like a new housing development. Like trying to visit my friend in a suburb that was just built. The street wasn't in Google Maps yet, right? So, but this was a game they made because people walk on foot when they're playing it. And so what they wanted to do was they wanted to record where everyone was walking while playing the game. The game was free, obviously. And so you get people walking around like, oh, go to this point in your neighborhood. And you'd walk there. And so if enough people walked there, then Google's like, there's a path there. And so they did this to track everyone's movement. All these millions of people playing it, they think they're playing a game. What they're actually doing is giving footpath data to Google. They're literally tracking your movement. And if people over and over again walk, this way through the park, they're like, okay, there must be a sidewalk there. And so that's why it was made at Google. It's because Google Maps has a navigate by foot feature. If you go to maps.google.com and zoom in on Fresno, loads. Where are we? Kings Canyon, Fresno. Thank you. And let's go to Woodward Park. Let's say there we go. Shinzen Friendship Gardens. By the way, if you guys have never been to the Japanese gardens, you should totally go there. So one of the best parts of Fresno. So let's say we're going to navigate. So let's. Google has photographs also of most of the streets in America. I had a friend that used to do that for them. Just drive around. But look, you see how there's trail information, hiking trail information? Right? And so, a lot of that was generated by, I actually don't know if the Niantic data was used to make these things, but that's what Google's doing. So when you say navigate by foot from here to here, it'll be like, oh, take that trail, right? Rather than just drawing a straight line. Like it can actually do it. And it did that by, I don't know if you call it spying, but that's why those games exist, is to literally track your movements. And then with Pokemon Go, they also found it was a cash cow because people will pay money to get Pokemon. And so the way that Pokemon Go works is you pay $1 and you put an egg in an incubator, then you go out and you walk for 7 miles, and then the egg hatches, and you get a rare Pokemon, and you do that as much as you want. It's an exercise app. Now you don't want to use any app? Yeah. Well, there's permissions on your phone, right? And so that's Google's response. Like, if you don't want it, turn it off. But will Pokemon Go work if you disable location tracking? No. The whole point of these games is to track you. That's the whole point. It's an exercise app. From your perspective, it is tracking you so that you can know how far you walk. And at the end of every week, Pokemon Go will tell you, congratulations, you walked 23 kilometers last week. There's some bonus eggs or whatever, Throw away your phone, yeah. That's what Richard Stallman does, right? So, Root Square now. So Richard Stallman is the head of the, was, and now he's been reinstated to the Free Software Foundation and the GNU Project. He's the equivalent of Bill Gates or Steve Jobs in the Linux world, right? There's basically Linus Torvalds, the guy who made Linux and is still the head of the Linux project today, which is, again, Android phones run on Linux, right? And Richard Stallman is the head of GNU and the Free Software Foundation until he got booted out for making comments during the Epstein affair. He said basically it's just odd that in some countries 17 is rape and 17 statutory rape and some it's not, and so they took that as defending, Epstein, which I think his point was more just about how arbitrary age limits are and things like that. But he has a DGAF attitude about those kinds of things. Like he's like yeah. Anyway, he left his visiting scientist role at MIT. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. So he's back though, like yesterday, I think that just happened. Anyway, so Richard Stallman doesn't use a cell phone, right? Or if he does, he goes to a public location and turns it on, and then he turns it off again. So like when he came out, he spent the night at my house a couple years ago. When he came out, he's like, all right, everyone turn our cell phones off. And so everyone goes, it's not just like, turning the screen off, power it down, and take out the battery as well. And then we can sit down and have lunch, And then only in public locations where, like at places where, he, like at Starbucks or something like that, he'll turn it on. He doesn't want them following his location around. And location data can be tracked on you even if you don't have GPS on your cell phone, by the way, because the cell phone company knows which antenna you're connected to, so they know where you are. They can use triangulation of multiple antennas to know within 50 feet where you are. So you don't even have to have GPS enabled. GPS just makes it more accurate. So yeah, so some people like Stallman are very hardcore about that kind of thing. Personally, it's like, as long as I know, how my data is being used, sure, I will grant Pokemon Go permission to track me. It's my exercise app. As much as I'm talking crap about it, like, yeah, I know they're tracking me. That's why I'm using it. So I'm not a purist like Stallman, but I'm also aware of like what they're doing with it. So only use payphones. Yeah, good luck. Good luck with that one. Flip phones can still be tracked. Even if you have a flip phone, they still know where your location is. So, and even if your phone is off, like my screen's not on right now, they still know the location. Right? So in order for you not to be tracked, you have to have the phone powered off. And nowadays you can't pull the battery out of the phone either. So yeah, good luck. Depends how paranoid you want to be, right? Depends how paranoid you want to be. I'm not that paranoid. Yeah. So, I use Pokemon Go. I'm just aware of why it exists. You know what I mean? So, war pigeons. So yeah, the news that Facebook shows to you, and so a lot of computer science people say, well, look, if I don't make race one of the fields that I'm training my AI on, then I'll be fine, right? Then it'll be a neutral algorithm, and that's a very common belief, right? Like, if you just don't have your hiring bot look at race, then it's neutral. But like what we saw last time with the parole software, right, or the sentencing software, right, is that a lot of the questions they're asking on the test can be used to infer race, and whether or not they're deliberately inferring race, I don't think they are. I don't think they're trying to set out to be racist. In that case, the company itself, was it a UCLA? No, it was a University of Colorado. One of the predictive policing was UCLA. That was Laser. Laser was done by UCLA professor. The Compass one that we looked at last time, I think it was University of Colorado, that did a statistician, and they're basically just trying to create a statistical method to predict high risk, low risk for doing crimes again. And I don't think they set out to like punish, black people at a higher rate. But the questions they have on their survey that they give people, the machine learning thing was probably inferring these people are black from it, and then assigning them a higher score as a result. Or it just worked out that way. Either way you do it, the thing, according to the ProPublica paper, which again, I went through all of the sources for it, by the way, over the weekend. And I still don't have an answer to that question that I raised last time, which is, if you're checking the recidivism rate, are you checking the recidivism rate on people that are still in prison? For one of the fields, they said we're going to exclude people that are in prison for it, but they didn't say that for the other ones. And so there's not enough data for me to actually endorse the result. You know what I mean? Like, even though, like, I think it's probably true, maybe, I'm going to go out and say I'm like, 70% confident it's a correct conclusion. Because I did find another paper that analyzed it also by a different group. If you have a validity threat like that, then I can't fully endorse it. Because if it's like what we talked about before, correlation is not causation. If Fannie Mae says owning a house will cause you to get a job, I'm going to be like, no, man. Like, people with jobs get houses. It's the other way around. Just because having a job and having a house correlate together doesn't mean that raising housing levels is going to raise employment, like they claim. And so just because the system does have higher error when it comes to black defendants than white defendants, or error in the different direction, it tends to assess black people at a higher risk of recidivism falsely, like and white people false negatives. If you are including, if you're not taking into account the fact that the system itself is used to punish people, and those people go to jail, and so they don't recidivize because they're still in jail, then that invalidates the entire study, and so I can't endorse it, right? Because, like I said, I went through, and there's a link in this presentation here where you can read their analysis and methods, and it doesn't say whether or not they're tracking recidivism for people in jail. It only makes sense to track it for people once they get out of jail. Once they get out of jail, then track them for 2 years, right? And if you're just, because as far as I can tell, this was the start date, this is the end date, and they just saw, did this person commit another crime by the end date? And if so, that's not a valid study. So, use the F language since I've never heard of the whistling language. Why can't we solve kidnap cases or find a missing person? You can. If a missing person has their cell phone on them, then the police can find them, right? A lot of times they're out in the mountains and there's no service up there. Like, it's really annoying when you're in Yosemite trying to meet up with your friends and you can't get any reception. Like, I was walking around like this, like trying, trying to send a text like, hey, I'm here, where are you, because my friend wasn't there, and trying to get like 1 bar of reception so the text would go through. So or if you're going to kidnap somebody, pro tip, throw their cell phone away. I did an essay on recidivism before. It's fairly difficult to find good information and statistics. Yeah, it's that. I mean, it's that's a good point for a lot of things. Like my friends on Facebook are saying racism is worse than ever, or racism is better in America than ever, and I'm like, where is the data? Show me the data on that, and everybody, at least in my friends, don't know. They're just doing an ad populum fallacy. Everybody knows racism is worse now than ever before. It seems like everywhere I look, I see white supremacists on TV. That was after the Charlottesville riots, right? Well, you're seeing it everywhere on TV because everybody's watching the news, right? That's not stats. That's cherry picking, right? So what are the stats? Is white supremacy up or is it down? Who's doing studies on this? Who's doing surveys? Who's gathering data so that we can actually say whether or not that's the case? I don't know. Right? And so I actually dug around, and I did find the University of Illinois has been tracking racist attitudes over time. And I actually have some of those in here. And so you can actually see that, support for people of black and white kids going to school together used to be at around 30%. Nowadays, they don't even ask it anymore because the support for it is so high. Should we have laws against interracial marriage? 35% of people said we should not have laws against interracial marriage. Nowadays, it's up to 90%. Do you personally support interracial marriage? Was it 15%? Which is interesting, right? Because there was this gap here is very interesting to me, because these are people that personally believe that interracial marriage is okay. So 15% of people believed it was okay in 1960, but only about 40% said there should be a law against it. So at almost a 3-to-1 ratio, Americans were like, yeah, I don't believe in it, but I think it should be okay for you too, which is interesting, right? It's interesting because America has this tradition of get the government out of my bedroom, and so you can see that more people are opposed to the government getting involved than they personally believe. And so there is hard data on this kind of stuff, but it's hard to get at, and like with the Charlottesville thing, it's like all these people were making claims about the state of America, and I'm just like, until you show me some quantitative data, man, you can't just appeal to everybody knows. So we used to have laws banning interracial marriage. Sure, they do blood tests, and there was all of this really you don't especially when you're talking about America in the 1930s, you don't have to lift too many stones and look underneath them to find racism. Minimum wage laws were directly as the result of a representative from Long Island getting upset that white workers were being displaced by black workers. Black workers were out competing white construction workers in Long Island, and so the minimum wage law came about because they wanted to raise the minimum rate you could pay people so that they could be racist. That was literally the point of having the minimum wage law, was because if the white workers were charging $10 an hour and the black workers were charging $5 an hour, so everybody was hiring the black workers because they were doing the same quality work at half the price. Of course they're going to hire them. And so this guy got offended. He's like, we'll just pay everybody $10 an hour in modern terms, right? And then that allows racists to be racist, because then if you could pick between a white and a black worker, if you're racist, you'd pick the white worker, and so literally you can you don't have to scratch the surface very, very far. Nowadays though, racism, you can see from those graphs and things like that, racist attitudes are rejected by our society. And so if you're going to make a claim like my friends did, that I see white supremacy everywhere, it's okay, is that an artifact of you watching a news story, or is it reality? Try to present me evidence that this is the case. And nobody had me, right? And that bothers me as a critical thinking professor. It's like, it bothers me. Show me the evidence. So equal pay for better discrimination. Yeah, and so it's really funny is that a lot of people don't know the history of the minimum wage laws, and it's like, is it different today? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. So. Yeah. All right. So that is it for today. We're gonna talk about. Yeah. I'll leave you with this. That don't use Twitter to train your AI. So Microsoft Tay was a chat bot that Microsoft made that was trained on tweets, and Twitter, once they discovered that Tay was learning from tweets, trained it to say horrible things. And honestly, it was just kind of funny because like Microsoft really should have known better than to do that. And yeah, so this is not by any means the worst thing that Tay said. So if you want to look at Microsoft Tay, it's rather amusing. So yeah, all right. So we'll continue this with a discussion of racism, one of the most cheerful and happy subjects, but important. We'll pick that up next time. Okay. Good luck, you guys, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.